Part 7. In Chapter 1, like a king, Orso reflects on his unexpected rise to power, feeling proud of his recent victory despite the challenges he faced. He is now a king, having outwitted his enemies and captured the once heroic Leo Dan Brock, whose downfall is emphasized by his ruined leg and loss of reputation. As Orso rides towards Adua, he feels a sense of anticipation for the adoration awaiting him, but the reality of his homecoming is starkly different. The city is filled with unrest, and instead of a warm reception, Orso encounters jeering crowds. Riots and anger grow with striking workers and hostile citizens. Amid this chaos, Orso's former lover, Savine, watches helplessly as the streets erupt in violence. The sense of triumph is shattered as Orso faces a city on the brink of revolt, the very people he sought to rule now turning against him. In Chapter 2, Change, Vic watches the growing People's Army, a ragtag but passionate group marching toward Adua. Initially skeptical, she's moved by the sheer scale and enthusiasm of the army, which includes former soldiers, workers, and even beggars, all united by a desire for a better future. Despite doubts about the army's unity, Vic begins to wonder if this revolution could truly bring change. She reflects on her past experiences and how the world around her is shaking apart, unsure of who will emerge as the winners. As the army nears Adua, its leaders, Risinau and Judge, reveal their contrasting approaches to the revolution. Judge is eager for action, while Risinau talks of high ideals. At the gates of Adua, the People's Army demands the loyalty of the city, and with the symbolic fall of the High King's banner, they begin their march into the capital, signaling a potential new era. In Chapter 3, The Little People, Yaqib, excited by the arrival of the breakers, rushes into the streets to join the revolution. He is swept up in the festive chaos, with people celebrating the arrival of the People's Army, led by the fierce Judge. Meanwhile, Captain Lieb and his soldiers struggle with the overwhelming number of rebels, unsure whether to fight or join them. Lieb orders his men to shoot, but the mob overwhelms them, forcing a retreat. Shawley, an opportunist, takes advantage of the disorder, killing his old enemy Fernevelt with an axe. Meanwhile, Lilith, Fernevelt's daughter, flees the chaos in a blood-stained wedding dress, torn between fear and the realization that the revolution has arrived. As the mob approaches the Agriant, Mother mostly leads the charge, demanding the king's justice. Inside, the gates open, and the breakers storm the city, tearing down the old order and establishing the new. In Chapter 4, No More Trouble, Broad, locked in a cell, reflects on his mistakes and vows to change, swearing to live for his family if he ever gets out. To his surprise, a woman arrives with keys, releasing him into a chaotic, jubilant crowd. As he navigates through the madness, he sees former allies and foes, including Savine and Leo Dan Brock, who are both injured and struggling. The breakers have stormed the Agriant, and the once privileged leaders now find themselves at the mercy of the revolution. Despite the initial euphoria, tensions rise as the crowd turns on those associated with the old regime. Broad defends Leo, reaffirming his status as a hero, and tries to navigate the shifting allegiances. Amid the turmoil, Broad's past as a ladderman resurfaces, and he's reminded that trouble is never far behind, no matter how hard he tries to avoid it. In Chapter 5, Bring Out the King, Orso watches in disbelief as a massive crowd of breakers surrounds the palace, demanding his surrender. Despite his fear, he remains calm, considering his limited options. Orso contemplates his legacy and the collapse of the Union, reflecting on the failure of past kings and the absence of powerful allies, like Bayaz. His thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of Pike, once his ally, now the leader of the rebels. Pike reveals his true role as the Weaver, orchestrating the revolution from within. Orso, resigned to his fate, surrenders the palace to Pike, asking for mercy for his guards. Pike agrees, stating that the people will decide what happens next. Orso, bewildered, questions whether the people are truly equipped to govern as the crowd watches in silence, leaving the future uncertain. The chapter ends with Orso's fate in the hands of the revolution. In Chapter 6, All the Cards, Rika reflects on the power dynamics at Scarling's Hall, where she now commands a group of warriors after taking control of the north. Her focus shifts when Corlith bursts in to announce that they've captured Stour Nightfall, the former king of the Northmen. The warriors bring him in, broken and humiliated, but Rika struggles with her feelings toward him as vengeance no longer brings satisfaction. Despite her plans for a dramatic show of power, she simply kicks him, showing no joy in his suffering. As Rika continues to assert control, the conversation turns to Black Calder, another powerful figure she plans to confront. She orders her warriors to prepare for future battles while maintaining strategic control. Rika, in her new position of power, reflects on her rise and the harsh realities of leadership, as well as the weight of the decisions ahead. In Chapter 7, Questions, Vic, now Chief Inspector in the new Union, leads an inspection of the banking house of Valiant and Bulk, following an order from Commissioner Pike to shut it down. She demands the vault's key from the bank's senior clerk, Ario Materno, but he resists, claiming he lacks the authority. Vic, frustrated and increasingly impatient, orders her constables to prepare the cannon, threatening to destroy the bank's door. The clerk finally opens the vault door, but Vic learns that the manager holds the second key, which is also missing. After arresting Materno and his colleagues, Vic seals the bank, sending everyone to the House of Truth. As they leave, Tallow reflects on the emptiness of the newly formed union, where loyalty and power are shifting unpredictably. Vic, resolute and hardened, acknowledges that while things have changed, they remain as chaotic as ever. In Chapter 8, Citizens, Orso reflects on the chaotic state of the new union, where the once royal lords round is now the commons round. The Assembly of Representatives elected by the people is filled with a mix of common folk, artists, and intellectuals, but Risinau, the chairman, dominates the proceedings with verbose speeches. The Assembly struggles with basic governance, arguing endlessly, and many of Orso's former enemies, now turned allies, remain in power. Despite the supposed shift to a republic, the monarchy still exists in a weakened form, with Orso treated as a royal figurehead. Leo, severely injured, reluctantly stands to make a symbolic gesture, renouncing his noble title in an attempt to unify the people. But his sacrifice feels hollow, and his physical and emotional pain is evident. Meanwhile, tensions rise as Sulphur, a representative of Bayaz, confronts the assembly, highlighting the fading influence of wizards. In Chapter 9, Miracles, Savine is in excruciating labor, overwhelmed by the agony and fear of childbirth. As she struggles with the pain, memories of women she's known who died during childbirth haunt her. The surgeon, trying to remain professional, irritates her with his calm demeanor, and she snarls at him. Despite the chaos, Savine delivers a son, a moment that unexpectedly fills her with a sense of awe and joy, even though she'd once scorned the idea of children. As she bonds with the baby, Leo enters the room, and both parents are stunned by the reality of their son. However, the joy is short-lived when Savine experiences more pain. The surgeon informs them that she is carrying twins, adding another layer of complication and uncertainty. The chapter captures Savine's transformation, from a hardened, ambitious woman to a mother, with both emotional and physical challenges ahead. In Chapter 10, A Little Public Hanging, Orso is horrified as he watches a public execution in the Square of Marshals. The Breakers have set up a new, theatrical method of hanging using steel cables and a counterweight system. Orso witnesses his former allies from the Closed Council, Lord Hoff, Lord Gorodetz, High Consul Matstringer, and Lord Marshal Ruckstead, being dragged to their deaths. The mob cheers and mocks, with the execution becoming a grisly spectacle. Orso, once king, is now a powerless spectator, trapped in a royal enclosure. He watches as his former colleagues are gruesomely executed, with one of the hangings going wrong, leading to a grotesque and bloody scene. Risinau, now the chairman, brushes off the brutality, eager to focus on the next task. Orso reflects on his failure to protect both his people and his former allies, realizing that the brutal new world may be permanent. In Chapter 11, Nest of Vipers, Rika, Izern, and Corlith navigate the streets of Carleon, suspicious of Corlith's secretive behavior. Izern is convinced Corlith is hiding something, leading Rika to reluctantly agree to investigate. They follow Corlith to a humble house where she regularly visits her grandmother. Izern bursts in, threatening Corlith with a dagger, but the scene quickly shifts to comedy when the house reveals only a simple family home with an old woman making soup. Corlith admits she has been bringing supplies to her grandmother and hadn't felt the need to explain herself. The misunderstanding clears, and Rika feels guilty. Afterward, Izern warns Rika to remain vigilant, especially in her new role in Scarling's chair. Rika brushes off Izern's concerns, teasing her about her own overprotectiveness and playfully admiring Corlith's sturdiness. Despite their close call, Rika remains confident in her leadership. In Chapter 12, Lines of Communication, Clover and his group encounter Black Calder's men at a farm. After a tense exchange, Clover uses his arrows to surround them and de-escalates the situation. Trapper, a member of Calder's crew, explains that Calder is angry and cold, making deals with a man named Stand of the Barrows from beyond the Crinna. Despite the hostile atmosphere, Clover offers to let the men go in exchange for information about Calder's plans. Tensions rise when Downside kills 2 of the men, but Clover insists on sparing the rest, maintaining communication lines with Calder. He sends them away, asking them to report back to Calder. Clover reflects on the challenges of choosing the right side in the conflict, wary of the consequences of his actions. He directs Downside and Flick to bury the dead, and the group discusses the precariousness of their situation in the shifting alliances of the North. In Chapter 13, the politician, Leo, still recovering from his injuries, debates whether to continue his political involvement in the Assembly. He is determined to use his position to shape the future of the Union despite his physical limitations. Savine, now a mother, warns him against making an exhibition of himself, but Leo is resolved. He reflects on his marriage, which was a political alliance, and the need for allies to secure their future. He also plans to reach out to his mother and others in England to support Rissenau's changes. Leo meets with Chairman Rissenau, who praises his efforts and shares his vision of equality. Leo suggests he can help reconcile England with the Union, bringing in trustworthy men to represent the province. Rissenau welcomes Leo's support, and the chapter ends with Leo, despite his pain, realizing the complexities of his new role in the changing political landscape. In Chapter 14, Anger, Vic faces a mob riot over shortages in Ottawa, where anger is a daily companion for the masses. Captain Broad and Vic try to handle the situation with force and diplomacy, though tensions rise as the crowd grows more unruly. Vic tries to reason with the protesters, acknowledging their frustrations, but violence erupts when the crowd hurls objects, leading to a clash. Vic uses her brass knuckles to subdue a woman, and Broad's men control the mob with force. After the riot ends, Vic reports to Commissioner Pike, who dismisses the dead as teething pains in the Great Change. Vic challenges Pike, expressing her concern over the chaos and the lack of control from Chairman Rissenau, who she believes is unfit to lead. Pike, however, insists on his vision of gradual change and the necessity of leadership, leaving Vic frustrated by the lack of real solutions. In Chapter 15, Opportunities, Savine struggles with the challenges of motherhood, the absence of pearl dust, and her growing sense of isolation. She reflects on her past life of social engagements and the current situation where she feels trapped at home. Her brothers, Haroon and Rabek, arrive, offering her comfort, though the conversation reveals their past regrets. When Savine receives a visit from Court, she faces the stark reality of the Great Change, where old allegiances and opportunities are being redefined. Court suggests taking advantage of the chaos, but Savine, now more cautious, urges him to avoid drawing attention. After his departure, Savine resolves to take action. She plans to secure food supplies, navigate the market risks, and use her influence to help her family. Acknowledging the need for change, Savine seeks to gain popularity by giving back to the people, even though she feels overwhelmed by her responsibilities. In Chapter 16, an exhibit, Orso is confined to a remote palace room, now an exhibit for the public. His meals are unappetizing, and he is treated with contempt by the crowds who tour the palace. Despite the humiliations, he finds solace in small comforts, like the bread provided by his loyal servant Hildy. When Corporal Tunney arrives, Orso is taunted, but receives an unexpected note from him, revealing a secret network of support. Tunney apologizes for his public scorn, claiming to be in contact with loyalists like Lord Marshal Forrest, Princess Carlot, and Bremer Dan Gorst, all of whom are preparing to help Orso. Orso is filled with hope as he realizes he has not been abandoned. Though the road to reclaiming power will be long, the note gives him a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. The chapter ends with Orso savoring the hope of his eventual rescue. In Chapter 17, different this time, Leo and Savine settle into a modest home to project an image of humility, reflecting the new societal expectations. Leo struggles with the pain from his injuries and his pride, while Savine discusses the dire conditions in the city, particularly the growing homelessness and suffering. Savine reveals her decision to open an orphanage and make the right appearances in these uncertain times. Their conversation shifts to a tense reunion with Leo's old friend Urand. The two men confront their past failures, including Leo's role in the deaths of their companions at Stauffenbeck. Despite the tension, Savine diffuses the situation with the babies and the mood lightens. Durand, now more pragmatic, agrees to support Leo's efforts to stabilize the Union. Leo acknowledges his need for Duran's help, and the chapter ends with the uncertainty of their future plans, accompanied by the ominous sound of another explosion. In Chapter 18, Quarrels, Rike and the Nail have a violent confrontation after a heated argument. Rike chases him out of Bethed's former fortress, mocking him for his cowardice. As the Nail storms away with his men, Rike, Corlith, Eisern, and Shivers discuss the consequences of his departure. The Nail's refusal to ally with Rike, despite the looming threat of Black Calder, leaves them in a vulnerable position. Rike tries to hold on to her authority, but is reminded by Eisern that power comes from careful planning, not just wrath. Later, Rike learns from Jonas Clover that he has made contact with Calder's forces, including a man named Trapper. Clover suggests keeping communication open with Calder, despite betraying him earlier. Rike proposes a risky deal with Calder in exchange for peace in the north, offering Calder's son as leverage. Clover agrees, and Rike prepares for the consequences. In Chapter 19, Too Many Principles, chaos unfolds in the assembly as representatives argue loudly with calls for moderation and accusations flying. Leo delivers a powerful speech promoting unity, loyalty, and equality, gaining support from the public gallery. Meanwhile, Orso watches with amusement, mocking the assembly's dysfunction. The tension escalates when Judge, a fierce burner leader, bursts into the assembly and arrests Risenau and his allies. She demands a fresh start and orders Risenau's execution. As the prisoners are dragged to the Tower of Chains, Broad, though disturbed, follows orders, guiding them up the tower, where they are pushed off one by one. The crowd cheers as the prisoners fall. Vic watches in horror, questioning the brutality of Judge's methods, while Pike calmly defends the actions, arguing that to rebuild, the world must first be destroyed. The chapter highlights the brutal shift in power and the consequences of the Great Change. Part 8. In Chapter 20, A Sea of Terror, Savine attends a Solar Society meeting, now a far cry from its former grandeur. The meeting, full of empty promises and empty seats, is dominated by the chaos of the Great Change. Kernsbick, trying to present optimism, ignores the hardships people face, including shortages, riots, and increasing violence. Savine reflects on how much things have changed, realizing she's become like her mother, detached from the world she once dominated. Conversations in the foyer reveal the desperate attempts to survive in a collapsing society, and Savine finds herself turning down business proposals, uncomfortable with the idea of profit amidst the suffering. The situation takes a dark turn when Master Sulphur threatens her children, causing Savine to lash out in anger. As she grapples with fear and guilt, she realizes she cannot run. The consequences of the past are closing in. In Chapter 21, Conspiracies, Swarbrick accuses a banker, miller, baker, and Styrian woman of a plot to manipulate markets and undermine the Great Change. The courtroom, now dominated by Judge and the Burners, is filled with chaos as accusations fly and the public gallery reacts with anger and mockery. The accused try to defend themselves, but facts are irrelevant, and any attempts at reason are dismissed. The mob, fueled by faith in the Great Change, demands punishment. Judge, in her role as the voice of the people, condemns the prisoners without trial, with only the Tower of Chains awaiting them. As the prisoners are dragged away, Orso reflects on the true conspiracy, the one to blame anyone for the failures of the Great Change. The chapter ends with Judge dismissing the proceedings, more interested in lunch than justice, highlighting the brutal, irrational nature of the new regime. In Chapter 22, Worse Than Murder, Vic and Tallow observe the brutal enforcement of Pike's war on the banks, which he sees as the root of all corruption. A cellar used by Valint and Balk, the notorious banking house, is raided with employees arrested and the papers burned in a public bonfire. Pike is fanatical in his quest to dismantle the financial system, disregarding the increasing violence, poverty, and homelessness in the city. He focuses solely on banks, calling usury a crime worse than murder, and dismisses Vic's concerns about the Burners' random violence. Vic reflects on the consequences of the Great Change as she watches the destruction unfold. She encounters an artist, Carmi Groom, sketching the scene for posterity, fearing that future generations may not believe the horrors of the present. The chapter underscores the devastating impact of unchecked zealotry and the brutal reshaping of society. In Chapter 23, Lessons, Ricka, Shivers, and Izern visit the site of the historic battle where Black Dow fought Calder. Ricka reflects on the bloody past and the consequences of leadership choices, notably her father's refusal to make a deal with Calder. They discuss their current struggles, with Ricka frustrated by the lack of unity in the north. Bayaz arrives unexpectedly, and after a tense exchange, he offers his help in securing the North's future, claiming he can shape it with his knowledge. Ricka challenges him, pointing out his past failures and manipulation of past leaders. Despite Bayaz's threats, Ricka stands her ground, asserting her independence. Bayaz ultimately leaves, and Ricka, feeling both relief and unease, resolves to continue forging her own path. As they head back north, Shivers warns Ricka that sometimes it's better to have control than freedom. In Chapter 24, far from finished, Jonas Clover arrives at Currahome, where he meets Black Calder, who rules the north. Clover reflects on the past and his complicated relationship with Calder, who is now a more reserved figure, having lost his son and much of his former power. Calder discusses his plan to reclaim the north, hinting at alliances with dangerous groups, and asks for Clover's support. Despite past betrayals, Calder is still determined to unify the North using ruthless methods. Clover is caught between loyalty to Ricka and his practical survival instincts, eventually agreeing to join Calder's cause. Calder's influence and cunning are apparent, and he makes it clear that the future of the North hinges on who controls it. Clover realizes that in the end the hero is the one who wins, and he must decide where his loyalties truly lie as Calder moves forward with his ambitions. In Chapter 25, The Only Explanation, Leo observes a trial where General Bell is accused of treason for a failed battle against Lord Marshal Forrest's royalist forces. Bell, overwhelmed and emotional, insists he did his best but is condemned by judge for losing, with the court showing no sympathy. Leo reflects on Bell's promotion and failure, attributing it to poor leadership and ill preparedness. During the trial, Leo's name is brought up as a potential leader, and Juran passionately promotes him as a symbol of courage. Despite mixed reactions, Leo gives an emotional speech, denying the position of general to avoid being seen as a failure like Bell. His refusal is framed as selflessness, gaining him some support but also anger from Judge and King Orso. As the trial continues, Leo understands that perception, not truth, drives the political atmosphere, and he questions the value of belief in the face of reality. In Chapter 26, Charity, Savine walks through the slums of Adua, where the Great Change has worsened conditions for the poor. She meets Citizen Valimir, who now struggles to make a living after the collapse of his textile mill. Savine, who owns several bakeries and has set up a charitable operation, talks about her efforts to provide food and warmth to the city's destitute. However, her charity is carefully managed to prevent chaos, and she uses bribery to maintain order. Valimir questions her motivations, suspecting there might be an angle, but Savine admits it is a selfish attempt to ease her own guilt for past wrongs, including exploiting children in her mills. Later, she reveals to Leo that she is the daughter of King Jazal, making Orso her brother. Leo, excited by the revelation, sees it as an opportunity rather than a danger, but Savine fears the implications for their family. In Chapter 27, The Good Work, the scene takes place in the Square of Martyrs, where executions are held regularly. Broad, drunk, and emotionally numb, performs his role in herding prisoners to their deaths. The area is a reflection of the decay following the Great Change, with corrupt activities flourishing around the executions. Broad struggles with guilt, alcoholism, and a growing sense of being lost in his actions. As he works, he becomes disturbed by the brutality of his job, realizing he's no different from those he loathes. Judge, the ruthless leader, shares her conviction that someone must carry out the necessary yet horrific tasks to bring about the change. The chapter culminates in an intense and violent encounter between Broad and Judge, showcasing their twisted connection as they engage in a raw and aggressive kiss. Broad's internal conflict, self-loathing, and desire for control are powerfully highlighted. In Chapter 28, The World a Camp, Vic navigates the bleak, snow-covered streets of Adua, reflecting on the growing oppression under Judge's rule. The city's transformation into a prison is evident as executions are increasingly frequent and the suffering of the population deepens. Vic observes the procession of a deceased burner, once a moderate leader, and hears rumors about Judge's increasing madness. Amidst the destitution and despair, Vic finds herself recalling her past hardships, from the camps to the loss of her family. As she moves through the city, she witnesses the harsh realities of life under the Great Change. In a quiet moment at a bar, she converses with a barman who suggests that escaping the chaos might be an option. Vic, contemplating her life and the marks it has left, decides to stand with the losers, recognizing that despite the hopelessness, it's time to face the challenges head on. In Chapter 29, Better Than Carnage, Orso wakes in a cold, makeshift prison cell and reflects on the dramatic fall from power he's experienced. His situation grows more dire as he's escorted to the House of Purity, a grim place of interrogations. Inside, he meets Inquisitor Teufel, who confronts him with a letter implicating him in royalist activities. Orso tries to downplay his involvement, but is met with Teufel's blunt acknowledgement that he's the Union's best chance at survival. Teufel offers to help him, promising to secure support through threats, bribes, and persuasion, hinting at a strategy that could restore him to power. She warns, however, that this is the lesser of evils compared to the current chaos. Orso, desperate and relieved, agrees to her terms, offering her full authority to act on his behalf. As the meeting ends, Vic shows a mix of cold professionalism and internal turmoil, signaling the complexity of their partnership. In Chapter 30, A Matter of Time, Savine and Leo share an intimate moment reflecting on the changes in their relationship after Leo's injury. Their intimacy is strained, marked by discomfort and unspoken resentments. Savine is consumed by guilt over her past actions, while Leo seems bitter about his current state. As they struggle with their connection, a cry from their infant children disrupts the moment, prompting Savine to tend to them. She reflects on her father's words about parenting and fear before she returns to Leo. Their conversation shifts to the political situation. They discuss the growing power of Judge and their involvement with King Orso, as Vic Dan Teufel offers them a deal to restore the monarchy. Savine and Leo agree, albeit reluctantly, acknowledging that the situation calls for desperate measures. As the chapter closes, their relationship remains fraught, with lingering questions about loyalty and betrayal. In Chapter 31, Taking and Keeping, Rika struggles with leadership as she sits in Scarling's chair, making difficult decisions for her people. A farmer begs for mercy, and although Rika wants to show compassion, she knows it could lead to problems with others. She is reminded of her father's leadership style, but finds it harder to command respect. When she learns that the Nail has attacked a village, Rika must confront the reality of holding Scarling's chair while facing threats from both Black Calder and her own people. Despite doubts, she rallies her forces, including Hardbread and Shivers, to confront the Nail, all while feeling the weight of her position. She shares a moment of reflection with Shivers, realizing the responsibility she carries. As her leadership is tested, Rika remains determined to keep control and face the challenges ahead, even if it means making tough choices. In Chapter 32, Thaw, Clover, and his companions face harsh conditions as they prepare to march toward Carlion. The group, including Flick, Shala, and Downside, deals with the challenges of the thawing winter, muddy terrain, and the ongoing pressures of their mission. Black Calder arrives with news of the march and demands they move despite the unfavorable conditions, which leaves Clover and the group feeling trapped between uncertain alliances and dangerous paths. Calder's leadership is questioned by Clover, who reflects on past betrayals and the consequences they face. As tensions rise, Shala, caught in her own frustrations, tries to carve the thinnest slice of cheese but is interrupted by the drip of water from above. The chapter highlights Clover's sense of entrapment, the unstable loyalty of their allies, and the precarious situation they find themselves in, both physically and morally. In Chapter 33, Love, Hate, Fear, Leo arrives at the palace, now a chaotic and blood-stained place under Judge's rule. He reflects on how things have changed since his last visit, with the once proud halls now filled with drunken revelry and disturbing sights. Leo is summoned to Judge's office, where he finds a chaotic mess and encounters the deadly atmosphere of the burners. Judge demands Leo's cooperation in her plans, offering him the opportunity to help restore King Orso to the throne, but with the price of his wife's potential trial. Leo agrees, though reluctantly, to Judge's terms, as it seems to be the only option to maintain any power. Tension builds as Leo contemplates the consequences of his decision, particularly regarding Savine's future. He leaves, determined to gather support, knowing that Judge will not hesitate to make a move against anyone who opposes her. In Chapter 34, this half-arsed conspiracy, Vic reflects on the unstable and dangerous alliance she's built with unlikely and untrustworthy figures, including Savine and Leo Brock, and the unreliable Tunney and Yoke. The situation worsens as Vic notices someone tailing her, a large man in a hood with a gray beard. She evades him through the crowded streets, taking a detour and meeting her contact, a representative of Chancellor Sartorius who provides her with jewels for bribing the city gates. As Vic returns home, she is ambushed by burners, but the situation is interrupted when Tallow, her trusted ally, arrives. After some tension, Vic assures him and continues to plan with Gorst, who has joined her after fleeing the burners. The chapter concludes with Vic reflecting on her precarious situation, realizing that despite the odds, she and Gorst are among the Union's last hopes. In Chapter 35, A Spicy Denunciation, Orso observes the deteriorating statues along the Kingsway, reflecting on the changes since the Great Change. The statues, once symbols of the Union's arrogance, now symbolize the crumbling state of the monarchy. As Orso enters the court of the people, he is confronted by angry crowds and jeering royalists, highlighting the volatile atmosphere. Orso, nervous about his imminent trial, whispers to Hildy about his fears of Judge's growing power. In the courtroom, Celeste Danhugen, a prisoner, unexpectedly denounces Savine Brock, accusing her of profiteering, conspiracies, and being the king's lover. She dramatically claims that Savine is the bastard daughter of King Jezil I. The shocking accusation sends ripples through the court, leaving Orso stunned. The revelation jeopardizes Orso's fragile position and brings further chaos to the already unstable political landscape, with Hildy noting the spicy nature of the denunciation. In Chapter 36, Purity, Leo Brock addresses a group of Purity officers, fanatical soldiers loyal to Judge and the Great Change. He asserts his new role as General of the People's Army and attempts to gain their approval despite his past failures and disfigurement. Leo offers them the chance to vote on whether to follow him, but he is confident in his leadership, having learned from past mistakes. After giving them time to deliberate, Leo walks outside to await the decision, reflecting on his growth and the lessons of defeat. The decision, however, is not in his hands. His men, including Anglanders, have already begun a brutal act of treachery. They set fire to the barn containing the Purity officers, trapping them inside. Leo commands his men to kill anyone who tries to escape. The chapter ends with Leo watching the flames rise, a grim reminder of his past and the sacrifices required for power. In Chapter 37, None of the Cards, news arrives that Black Calder is marching with a large army, including a brutal force from beyond the Crinna. Ricca is nervous but resolute, deciding to stay and fight despite the overwhelming odds. Her warriors, shaken by the losses of key allies like the Nail and Icerny Fail, question their chances, with some fearing Calder's superior numbers. Ricky reassures them, insisting that they have the walls and the will to fight. She plays her remaining cards, including the trapped Stour Nightfall, hinting at potential leverage. Despite Stour's ominous warnings, Ricca is determined to stand her ground, showing confidence to inspire those around her. She orders her people to prepare for battle, even suggesting that some seek shelter while they ready themselves. The chapter highlights Rika's tough leadership, balancing fear with resolve, as she faces an impending, seemingly insurmountable threat. In Chapter 38, Horror on Horror, Black Calder's army struggles through harsh conditions with soldiers suffering from hunger, sickness, and exhaustion. Despite the difficult journey, Calder's forces are bolstered by the terrifying Stand of the Barrows, a warlord who travels with a wagon filled with human bones and chained slaves. His eerie and sadistic presence frightens allies and enemies alike. Calder, though, remains focused on the impending battle for Carleon, and the two leaders discuss the upcoming conflict. Clover reflects on the brutal nature of war, comparing it to an atrocity contest where fear and violence are the ultimate weapons for survival. He and his comrades express disillusionment with the bloodthirsty men they follow, but they continue, recognizing the inevitable violence ahead. As Calder and his men prepare for the fight, Clover wonders about Rika's decisions, suspecting she may know more than they do about the outcome of the coming battle. In Chapter 39, The Dragon's Hoard, Vic and Pike open the vault of the once powerful Valint and Bulk Bank, only to find it empty, confirming that the wealth once associated with the bank has long been moved. Vic, surprised and slightly amused, realizes that the true power of the bank was built on lies and promises, not gold. Pike, however, expresses a dark satisfaction, acknowledging that the great change has disrupted the old power structures. As Vic processes Pike's cryptic words about restoring order and dousing the flames of Judge's uncontrollable rule, she begins to believe they may still have a chance. Outside, Tallow comments on the empty vault, and Vic, despite the dire situation, smiles, feeling a rare hope. However, her optimism fades when the crier announces Savine Brock's charges, including incest, causing Vic to curse under her breath. In Chapter 40, None Saved, Savine Brock arrives at her family's former home, now a bleak orphanage. Inside, she is confronted by the horrific sight of sick, starving children, many of whom have been traumatized and deformed by the city's collapse. Citizeness. Valamir explains the dire conditions, including the growing number of orphaned and abandoned children and the lack of resources. As Savine grapples with the overwhelming reality of the situation, burners storm the house, arresting her for being denounced, with her chains symbolizing her fall. She is informed by Sarlby and Broad, former allies, that her husband, Leo, has struck a deal with Judge, leading to her betrayal. Savine is shocked to see Zuri, her companion, also arrested and muzzled, labeled a suspected eater. Savine's attempts to protect her children fail as she is dragged away, realizing she has failed to save anyone, not even herself. In Chapter 41, The Same Side, Leo Brock struggles with his physical limitations and the realities of his new leadership role. He prepares for battle, with Duran assisting him in getting dressed and ready. As Leo reflects on his past mistakes, he and Duran share a moment of unspoken emotion, highlighting their deep bond. Leo meets Lord Marshal Forrest, who grudgingly acknowledges their alliance despite their past opposition. They discuss the state of their respective armies, both struggling with exhaustion, hunger, and disillusionment. Leo admits that many of his men are ready for a return to the monarchy, while Forrest's troops are similarly weary. Despite their difficult conditions, Leo and Forrest agree that they must make their last stand count. Leo orders the march towards Adua, determined to lead his men to a final battle to restore the monarchy, despite the dire circumstances. In Chapter 42, Break What They Love, Rika and her crew prepare for battle as Black Calder's forces assemble outside Carleon's walls. Rika feels both fear and determination, with memories of past conflicts resurfacing. Calder's army is large, but ragged, and the city's defenders are equally weary. Rika prepares Stour Nightfall, a symbol of the North's past, to be handed over to Calder, but with a shocking twist. After some harsh banter, Ricky ultimately kills Stour by stabbing him in the throat, delivering a brutal lesson to Calder. The body is thrown from the parapet, signaling the end of an era. Calder's fury erupts as he orders the death of everyone in the city. As battle looms, Clover, caught in the chaos, is overwhelmed by the violence, realizing the grim reality of the war and his role in it. The chapter ends with an uncertain future for all involved. In Chapter 43, The Little People, the battle for Carleon intensifies as Black Calder's men storm the walls. Ricky's tactics, including her betrayal of Corleth and her manipulation of events, push the situation into chaos. While the battle rages outside, Corleth is captured by Ricka's forces. As Ricky confidently mocks her, the chaos inside and outside Carleon escalates. Black Calder's army falters as reinforcements arrive from unexpected directions, and men like Hardbread and the Nail scramble to adjust. Amidst the violence, Shola and Clover discuss the shifting allegiances, realizing Rika had planned for this all along. The Nail's men press into the fray with brutal efficiency, while Calder's forces crumble under the pressure. As the battle spirals, Stand in the Barrows, retreating from the battle, encounters a witch in the woods who controls eerie, twisted creatures, and demands his bones, leaving him and his men in a deadly trap. In Chapter 44, Satisfaction and Regret, Black Calder's defeat is sealed as his army falls apart under pressure from Rika's forces. Calder calmly accepts the loss, acknowledging that his dreams are dashed. As the battle rages, Clover faces a personal duel with Downside, a man he once trusted, and ultimately kills him in a moment of swift action. Meanwhile, Rika confronts Calder, revealing her long-standing plans to kill him and take control of the North. The final blow is delivered by Kallshivers, ending Calder's rule. Rika feels no satisfaction, only the weight of her father's oath fulfilled. As she stands victorious, the men rally around her, proclaiming her as their leader, Black Rika. Despite the bloody victory, she remains stoic, feeling both the triumph and the burden of her new role. The chapter ends with Rika taking her place as the ruler of the North as Calder's legacy crumbles. Part 9. In Chapter 45, ready for a fight, Savine, imprisoned and awaiting trial, struggles with her situation while preparing for her public trial. She faces personal regret as she reflects on the changes and betrayals that led to her arrest. Despite being treated well, the looming trial for profiteering, treason, and even incest weighs heavily on her. She decides to present herself humbly, using her appearance to align with the citizeness identity, distancing herself from her previous privileged life. Meanwhile, Leo and his allies are on their way to Adua to save the king and Savine. Leo plans a bold move to breach the city and rescue her, while Vic and Gorst prepare for their own mission to capture the chain room in the Agriant. Time is tight, and Vic's strategy involves a risky operation with minimal support, relying on Gorst's strength and precision. The stakes are high, and failure could be deadly. In Chapter 46, We Know Who You Are, Savine faces trial in the court of the people for accusations including profiteering, treason, and consorting with enemies of the Union. Orso, imprisoned nearby, anxiously waits for the young lion's arrival to rescue them. Savine defends herself confidently, turning Swarbrecht's accusations back on him by quoting his own praise of her charitable work, gaining public support. Meanwhile, Leo and his forces charge into the city to free the king and Savine. Vic and Gorst infiltrate the chain room, easily dispatching the guards with brutal efficiency. However, they soon discover that the bar to secure the door is missing, leaving them vulnerable to an impending guard response. As the battle for the Union intensifies, their luck may be running out, and the situation grows increasingly dire. In Chapter 47, The Side of the Saints, Savine's trial intensifies as Judge harshly accuses her of profiteering, corruption, and exploiting the people. Savine refuses to denounce her father or betray others, maintaining her dignity despite the pressure. Meanwhile, Orso, imprisoned in the court, buys time by denouncing various figures, including his father and Bayaz, to distract the court. Tensions rise as news arrives that Lord Marshal Forrest and his forces, led by Leo, are approaching the Agriant. Vic and Gorst, holding the chain room, face a dangerous confrontation with burners. After a brutal fight, they manage to secure the room, but Vic is severely injured. Leo and his forces charge through the city, breaking through burners' resistance and making their way to the Agriant to rescue Savine and the king. Leo's determination drives him forward, despite his injuries and exhaustion. The fate of the Union hangs in the balance. In Chapter 48, The Sentence, Savine faces her execution as chaos erupts in the Square of Martyrs due to the approach of a royalist army. She refuses Judge's offer to save herself by denouncing her father, and tensions rise as Orso buys time by denouncing various figures. As they are led to the Tower of Chains, fighting intensifies, and Savine experiences terror at the thought of her death. Meanwhile, Orso's loyal allies break through and they are rescued. After a violent battle, Orso regains his status as king. However, just as hope seems restored, Leo Dan Brock reveals his treacherous plan. He betrays the Union and claims the throne for his son Herod. Forrest is killed, and Orso is captured alongside his allies. The Royalists seize control, marking the end of the Great Change, and Brock declares his son as the new king, securing his power with force. In Chapter 49, Forging the Future, Riki assumes leadership with a mix of authority and humor as she distributes rewards and punishments. Hardbread is appointed as her second, and the Nail receives land in exchange for handling the rebellious city of Olenson. Rika plans a trip to Adua to negotiate with the Union and secure peace. Meanwhile, she shows mercy to former enemies, including Brode Flatstone, offering him a chance to serve her. Tensions rise as Rika balances compassion with the need to maintain control. She deals with traitors, offering them chances for redemption while making examples of those who oppose her. After a long day of decisions, Rika feels the weight of leadership as she ensures the North remains stable. The chapter highlights her growing power and the difficult choices of ruling, with Shivers bringing in one final person for judgment. In Chapter 50, A half-baked loaf. Clover reflects on his life of shifting allegiances, having served various leaders and seen them rise and fall. As he watches those summoned for judgment, he wonders about his own future. When he faces Rika, she offers him a choice: death for his indecision or a chance for a new life. Despite his past, Clover admits to his flaws and his one good deed, saving Rika in the woods. Rika decides to spare him, offering him silver and a chance to recommend two loyal companions: Shola, a skilled archer, and Flick, a quiet but pleasant companion. Clover requests their loyalty and, after a final farewell, advises them to beware of deceit in Adua. Rika accepts his recommendations, but remains skeptical of his true intentions. Clover leaves, sword over his shoulder, knowing something new will always come his way. In Chapter 51, Sunrise, Leo and Savine navigate the aftermath of the great change in the Agrion. Leo is eager to consolidate his power as King Herod's regent, while Savine struggles with her discomfort in the palace and the ever-present reminder of the Burner's rule. As Leo speaks to the representatives, he moves towards securing his position, presenting Herod as the new king. However, Leo, aided by the nobles, swiftly orchestrates a vote to confirm his own regency. Savine, despite her misgivings, supports him outwardly, but feels uneasy about the future. Leo's speech to rebuild the Union is met with applause, and the nobles eagerly sign a new declaration, marking the rise of a new era. Though Leo is filled with triumph, Savine watches with a growing sense of unease, her thoughts focused on the political shift and what it means for their future. In Chapter 52, We Must Have Enemies, Vic interrogates Master Sarlby, a notorious figure involved in the Great Change. Sarlby remains defiant, but Vic is too tired and worn to care much about his threats. She reveals that Sarlby will be executed the next day, signaling the end of his rebellion. Afterward, Vic encounters Savine, who is changed into a more hardened human figure. Despite Savine's complex past and the tension between them, Vic asks if the future can be better, and Savine promises to try. Vic, exhausted and broken, still holds on to the hope that it won't all be for nothing. Later, Vic oversees the interrogation of Spillian Swarbrick, a cowardly, self-serving former ally. Savine, now Lady Regent, uses Swarbrick for her own gain, forcing him to praise her in writing. She spares his life only as long as he remains useful, a pragmatic move in the rebuilding of the Union. In Chapter 53, A Sea of Power, Savine enjoys the adoration of Adua's elite at a Solar Society meeting, where Kernsbick praises her leadership. She's celebrated as the mother of the nation, though her internal struggles persist. Despite the outward show of change, Savine revels in the power she now holds, feeling the satisfaction of others kneeling before her. She continues to maneuver politically, engaging with ambitious figures like Kernsbick, who suggest she consider him for a position on the closed council. Savine also offers a seat to Celeste Danhugen, recognizing her potential despite previous betrayals. As the crowd cheers her, Savine maintains control, dismissing dissenting figures like Yoru Sulfur, a magus who threatens her. Savine's confidence in her position grows, and she reflects on how, despite the challenges, she has emerged stronger, now ruling over Adua's high society. In Chapter 54, Not for the Prizes, Leo struggles with his injuries as he reunites with his mother, who expresses concern over his state. They discuss the state of the Union, with Leo emphasizing the need for control and a strong army to ensure stability. Tensions rise when his mother brings up the influence of the first of the Magi and his past debts. As Leo vents his frustration about the present situation, his mother urges caution, but Leo insists on taking a more forceful approach. At a dinner, Leo and Savine engage with Westport's delegates, discussing the need to secure the Union's future. The conversation takes a tense turn when one delegate suggests that former King Orso remains a threat. Leo's response is cold and decisive, hinting at brutal measures. Savine, ever the political mastermind, supports Leo's stance, reminding him that sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. In Chapter 55, Redemption, Orso, now freed from his cell, reflects on his fall from power as he escapes the city with the help of his loyal associates, including Tunny, Hildy, and Bremer Dan Gorst. They head toward safety, but Orso's thoughts are conflicted. While grateful for his freedom, he contemplates abandoning his claim to the throne and seeking a quiet life. However, the reality of his situation sets in as the group encounters a blockade, with Anglander soldiers searching every boat leaving the city. Tunney and Hildy help Orso through the dangerous situation, and he realizes the grip of Leo Dan Brock on the city is tightening. As Orso moves forward, the weight of his choices and the looming possibility of returning to power or fading into obscurity becomes more pressing. He is forced to acknowledge that escaping the city might not be the end of his struggles. In Chapter 56, Was Bad, Gunnar Broad, now reunited with his family, struggles with the trauma of his past actions, particularly his role in the Court of the People. He tries to hide his guilt, but when Savine visits, he confronts uncomfortable truths about himself. Savine reveals that she had a hand in arranging his escape and subtly manipulates him by revealing that the letter Broad had cherished as a lifeline was actually written by her. She tasks him with going to Valbeck to deal with the remaining breakers, further cementing her control over him. Broad, still haunted by his past, wants to refuse, but is pressured by his sense of duty and Savine's unyielding demands. As he prepares to leave, he reflects on the cycle of violence and loyalty, torn between his family and the role Savine expects him to play. In Chapter 57, So Many Changes, Rika arrives in Adua, feeling unsettled after a tumultuous journey. She is greeted by Jiran, now the interim Lord Chamberlain, and they exchange pleasantries, though Rika senses tension surrounding her return. The city is a shadow of its former self, with signs of reconstruction and heavy military presence. Durand explains that the Lady Regent, Savine, has big plans, including a new enormous bank to replace the destroyed Valent and Bulk. Rika is taken to a grand house, once an orphanage, now assigned to her by Savine. Inside, she meets Liddy, May, and Haroon, who offer assistance. Despite the warm welcome, Rika feels a sense of unease about the functions Savine has planned at the Agrion. As the conversation turns to Savine's influence, Rika acknowledges the stark differences between her past and present life. She reflects on the need for change, setting the tone for her future role. In Chapter 58, Good Times, Savine hosts a reception in the palace gardens, marking a new beginning after the turmoil of the Great Change. However, tension fills the air as Leo remains distant and authoritative, enforcing harsh restrictions on the city. Rika makes a dramatic entrance, now a powerful figure with a distinctive entourage. Despite their past betrayals, she and Savine share a warm exchange, with Rika confronting Leo about their strained relationship. Leo, still grappling with the weight of his actions, feels resentment and frustration, particularly towards his wife Savine, who he now realizes made secret deals behind his back. The evening ends with Rika and Orso meeting in private, where Orso asks for her help to escape Adua. They reminisce about their past, with unresolved feelings simmering between them. Rika ultimately succumbs to temptation, spending an intimate moment with Orso, acknowledging that nothing is ever truly finished or right. In Chapter 59, Your Heart of Stone, Orso wakes in a comfortable bed reflecting on the chaos and hardship he's endured. Though he is still on the run, he feels a sense of possibility with Rika's support. He joins Rika and Isern for breakfast, where he tries to lighten the mood, but tension remains, especially when Rika reveals that her Long Eye, once a source of power, has gone dark. As they discuss their past, Rika admits to sacrificing her own heart to lead, echoing a sentiment of ruthlessness she's had to adopt. Orso sarcastically remarks on the treachery in the north, feeling betrayed by Rika's alliance with Leo, who arrives with his men. Orso's mood turns grim as Leo orders his capture, and Rika's coldness underscores the painful choices she's made. In Chains, Orso reflects on the bitter reality of peace between the North and the Union. In Chapter 60, Answers, Vic prepares to leave a place she can no longer stay, packing only what she can carry. She discovers that Orso has been captured, betrayed by Rika. As she discusses her next steps with Tallow, he grows panicked about his sister, but Vic insists they must leave quickly. Tallow leads her to a house where they are confronted by Inquisitor Pike, who reveals himself as the true weaver behind the breakers and the Great Change. Vic learns that Pike manipulated her and others to achieve his own goals, turning them into pawns in his game. Pike offers her a chance to join him, giving her a ring as a symbol of power. Vic rejects him, realizing she has been used. She decides to forge her own path, leaving behind the ring, the lies, and her past loyalty. She walks into the night, seeking her own future. In Chapter 61, The Only Crime, Savine spars with Jiran, demonstrating her fencing skills while discussing the future of the Union. She advocates for a progressive new closed council, suggesting engineers and innovators for leadership. The conversation takes a more personal turn as Savine manipulates Duran by hinting at Leo's infidelity to gain his support. Later, Savine's father reveals his role in orchestrating the Great Change, admitting his ruthless actions to free the Union from Bayaz's control. He confesses to being behind the turmoil, including the destruction of the Court of the People. Savine is horrified by the extent of her father's involvement, realizing he used her and her children as pawns in his scheme. As tension builds, Sulphur, an eater, arrives to confront her father, leading to a violent battle with Zuri, Harun, and Rabik intervening. Savine is left to confront her father's manipulations and decide her next move. In Chapter 62, Great Men's Footsteps, Rika returns to Ufrith, feeling a sense of nostalgia and homecoming. As she reflects on her past and her father's legacy, she faces the weight of leadership and the choices she's made. She confides in Shivers, discussing the doubts and regrets that accompany her position, but ultimately, she is determined to lead the North in her own way, outside of Scarling's Hall and the traditional power structures. Isern challenges Rika's decision to rule from Ufrith, urging her to follow in the footsteps of great men, but Rika rejects this, declaring that she will make her own path even if it means ruling from a humble or unconventional place. Her defiance solidifies her resolve, and she takes ownership of her leadership, asserting that the choices she makes are hers alone. The chapter ends with Rika's acceptance of her new role, despite the challenges ahead. In Chapter 63, The Moment, Clover arrives at the Great Northern Library, a secluded place in the mountains where he is to teach swordsmanship. He meets Bayaz, the first of the Magi, who acknowledges Clover's skills and asks him to teach a young, silent boy the art of the sword. The boy, who is revealed to be the half-brother of Stour Nightfall, displays impressive focus and strength. Clover begins his lessons, teaching the boy that the true key to swordsmanship is not just in fighting, but in timing and recognizing the right moment to strike. Clover also offers Bayaz a gift, a chain once worn by powerful figures, which Bayaz accepts with gratitude. As Clover begins to bond with his new pupil, he emphasizes that a warrior's true skill lies in survival, not in fame, as he watches the boy practice. In Chapter 64, A Little Private Hanging, Orso faces his execution in a small, somber setting. The atmosphere is devoid of the usual spectacle, and Orso reflects on his failures and regrets as he waits on the scaffold. Despite his impending death, he maintains a sense of humor, making light of the situation. He interacts briefly with the executioner, who scratches his nose at Orso's request, and he delivers a final speech to the gathered crowd. Orso expresses his acknowledgement of his shortcomings as a king, with a particular focus on the challenges he faced during his reign. He offers a heartfelt farewell to his sister Savine, expressing admiration for her leadership, and even cracks a joke at Leo's expense. His speech ends with a resigned acceptance of his fate as the trapdoor opens, signaling the end of his life. In Chapter 65, The Villain, Leo takes his seat at the head of the closed council, having won the Union's leadership. Despite his success, he is plagued by dissatisfaction, physical pain, and guilt over the sacrifices made. The session begins with Leo pushing for military reforms, but Savine challenges him, advocating for economic reforms instead. The council debates fiercely, with Savine's plan gaining the majority. Leo, frustrated, tries to assert his dominance, but is met with resistance from his wife, who insists on collaboration for the sake of their children and the Union. The chapter reveals the tension in their marriage, where both are driven by ambition and regret. Savine admits her past role in the betrayal and manipulation that led to their current positions, calling herself the villain. Despite their differences, she stresses the importance of working together, and the chapter ends with Leo reluctantly agreeing to cooperate. In Chapter 66, Curses and Blessings, Ricky experiences a haunting vision through the long eye, witnessing a future of destruction, bloodshed, and darkness. She sees figures like a black-haired boy and blonde-haired girl, as well as catastrophic events including the burning of Ufrith and the resurrection of the dead. Despite the foreboding images, she finds herself unable to decide whether the vision is a curse or a blessing. Upon sharing this with her people, the mood shifts as news arrives of Alencen's surrender. The Nail announces the victory with enthusiasm, and celebrations begin, including the arrival of barrels of ale. The North is united and the people cheer, but Rika feels the weight of her father's legacy. Amid the revelry, she keeps her vision to herself, telling Isern that it was nothing, as she tries to maintain a smile, hiding the unease within.